All of our productions at GCTV are sponsored in part by Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. Greenfield Community College, providing access and excellence in higher education in the Pioneer Valley. Visit them at gcc.mass.edu. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com. Call them at 772-0838 and check them out on Facebook. Real Cleaning Services, cleaning Hampshire and Franklin County since 1972. We don't cut corners, we clean them. Check them out online at realclean.com. Call them at 413-422-1143. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. The Solar Store of Greenfield, replacing fossil fuels and nuclear power one home at a time. Visit them at 23 Fisk Ave. Call them at 413-772-3122 or visit them online at solarstoreofgreenfield.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all of GCTV's productions.
February 25th, 2019. It's very windy out there. I'm glad we all made it tonight. This is a special meeting of the school committee here in Greenfield. We're at the John Zahn Center at 35 Pleasant Street. It is now 6:32 p.m. and we are being recorded and broadcast live by GCTV. Thank you very much, GCTV. It is the vision of the Greenfield Public Schools that every student has access to an academically rigorous, enriching, and well-rounded education that affords them opportunities to be well-connected scholars and contributing members of the broader society in which they live. Without further ado, we will have a roll call, please. Secretary Ekstrom.
Mayor Martin. Here. Member Alexander.
Here.
Vice Chair?
Yes.
Here. Chair Nunez.
Yes, here.
And myself, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And it's my understanding that Member Hollins is participating remotely. Is that correct?
Apologies, Member Hollins.
Here.
Okay. Is she able to be heard and can hear us?
Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
All right, we'll see.
Okay. Is
Your turn.
GCTV, are you picking up her mic? It's my understanding that according to the law, members should be able to hear the remote participant. Susan, could you just quickly say hello?
Susan Hollins,
Member
can you say hello
Hollins.
for us, please?
Hello, this is Susan. I'm sorry I can't be there tonight.
That worked out. Okay, great. My understanding is that the reason is twofold: distance, geographic distance, and illness.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging.
Great. So the
Call has been forwarded to an automated voice.
okay, we'll do what we can to get her. Otherwise, if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. Okay, so we do have a quorum. Everyone, we're here for a budget presentation for the FY20 year, as well as a public hearing. The way that I see this working out is we do have first public comment. If there's anyone here that's interested in just commenting on any items on the agenda, you're welcome to do so. We'll follow our usual public comment rules, which is 3 minutes of time. Can I get just like a little show of hands for those that are here to comment, either for public comment or for the hearing? Okay, great, super. So technically, according to the policy essentially reads that any comments from the committee come first, and then we hear from the public. However, I'd like to open the public hearing up just kind of throughout, and allow people to speak at the beginning if they'd like. We've done it that way before. And then at the end of the budget presentation if they'd like also. So I just want everyone in the public to be able to have the opportunity to weigh in. This is really an opportunity for us to hear from you. In general, we don't usually have a back and forth. It's not really a dialogue. If there are some follow-up questions from members, we may take them. Sometimes they're clarifying questions that in the past we have definitely engaged with. So I intend to do that this evening, but again, this is really for us to just open our ears and hear from you. So it's your opportunity to speak. Our policy doesn't necessarily dictate a guideline for the duration of time. I'd like to utilize our public comment time limitation, which would be 3 minutes. And is there someone on the committee that can help me to manage monitoring time? It'd be really helpful.
I can.
Awesome, thank you, Member Karen. Okay. So, our wonderful Secretary Farber was making a list of individuals that wanted to comment for public comment or public hearing. If you haven't already checked in with her at some point, please do so, because she will be sure to have your name recorded accurately for the record. When you come to the mic, please make sure that the mic is turned on. I think someone will have to press the button and the green light will turn on. And then you'll have 3 minutes. Please state your name and your address for the record. Let's see, there are also some copies of today's agenda and budget presentation that I believe are on the back table there if anyone would like them. We unfortunately don't have the projector working this evening. GCTV is going to be, as I mentioned, broadcasting and recording this, so that will be available for folks online. But for now, we have the printed copies.
They're also on the website.
And they are also on our website. Super. Okay, so are there any folks here that are specifically here for public comment? Yes, Mr. Cooley, would you like to come up?
Let's see. Hello? Hello?
Try, there it is.
Okay.
Super,
Is that better?
great.
Hello, Bob Cooley, 44 Overland Road. I wish you well in your budget deliberations. This is important, I'm telling you what you already know. Just a couple really quick things. I think that one of the things I hope that the school committee will be able to take on, and I'll present this to the Program and Policy Committee, is trauma-informed education. I've talked about this before. There's now a lot of really solid work out there, and an easy way for schools to access kids' experience with what they call adverse childhood experiences. It's a 10-question test, very easy, and some schools are doing this as early as kindergarten. As you know, there's some kids, by the time they get to school, it's like they've, been avoided a bus 5 times. Some kids are simply not ready, and we need to equip ourselves with that. There is a lot of good information out there. I'm very intrigued to hear what happens with the budget. I heard about a $1 million grant. I'm eager to see what you do with that and how that works its way into student service. I'd like to know whoever's running the Program and Policy Committee. I would love to have them tell me when the next committee meeting is. I'll also check on the website, because I'd like to participate in that, because I think that's where curriculum discussion is going to happen. The last thing I would just say is, in looking over last month's meeting, I was very concerned about what I saw in terms of how the committee's really not working together well. And, you know, I know in my 42 years in teaching and administrating, when I saw what I call bullying behavior, we worked very hard as my teams, my dorms, my faculty to avoid that, to work on that, and to address it. So when it happens, it's got to be stopped because it's going to get in your way unless you address it and work on it. And it was, to me, unacceptable what I witnessed. And I hope that, you know, it is everybody's responsibility, including me, to raise this, because it simply can't continue, particularly at a time, you know, never more important than when you're doing this. Remember, everybody has a stake. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other folks here for public comment? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Traver. I live on Homestead Avenue, and I am one of the co-chairs of the CPAC, the Special Education Parents Advisory Council. And first of all, I want to thank you all for the hard work that you do. We really, really do appreciate it. I can only imagine how difficult it is working this budget through. I can barely balance my checkbook. But I would like to speak to one of the line items that we're asking for in collaboration with the school system. It is a line item on the transportation budget for cameras on the special education school buses. I think everybody's painfully aware of the incident with the Kosmeskis bus over by Oak Courts last month, and what a fluke it was that that bus was brand new and did not yet have a camera installed, as do most of the Kosmeskis buses. However, the buses that Greenfield owns, the special education buses and vans, don't have cameras on them. And this is especially troubling because the kids who ride those buses and vans, many of them are nonverbal, and most of them couldn't be able to tell you what happens on a bus if there is an incident. Anecdotally, there have been some minor incidents where people didn't know what happened because no one saw it or no one could explain it. And it's basically just a matter of time before something happens that we're all going to wish we had had a camera on the bus so that we knew what was going on. So I would hope that you would be thinking very carefully about adding that little bit of money into the budget so that we can use this to safeguard our kids and our buses, our bus monitors, our bus drivers, and everybody who cares for them. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Are there any other folks here for public comment?
Hi. I'm Crystal Zimmer, 10.5 Stanley Street in Greenfield. Good evening. My name is Crystal Zimmer. I am the secretary of the CPAC in Greenfield, the mother of 2 special ed students, and a teacher outside the district with experience in special education and students with behavioral issues. I'm here to talk today about the need for more professional behavioral and para support in the district. This is to support the budget increases that are being requested. Many student behaviors stem from trauma, anxiety, and disabilities that require more specialized behavioral training for school staff. From speaking to some parents in the district, I was dismayed to hear of kindergartners being suspended for things as simple as having developmentally appropriate temper tantrums in class. This reaction just perpetuates and sometimes exacerbates the issues. There needs to be a real thought and consideration about how to manage behavioral issues. Just sending children home, sometimes to the source of the problem, is not the answer. Ultimately, behavioral intervention in the school starts in the classroom, and the best way to properly deal with these students is proper training and staffing. In the budget, there is a request for funding that would go to hiring an additional board-certified behavior analyst for the district. It is my belief that an additional BCBA would help better equip schools with skills and programs to best deal with and prevent behavioral issues. Having one professional level BCBA for a whole district is completely inadequate. In addition to the BCBA, I continue to push for the use and respect and training of paraprofessionals in the classroom. Last year, I spoke to you and my son's services were cut due to this great initiative to pull paras. As a result of this, my son spent an agonizing 4 months in anxiety, failing academics, and further declining in his self-confidence. After multiple team meetings and trying to do without inadequate para support, and thanks to the wonderful team he has at Four Corners, we finally got to add back some of his services, and his teachers reported a huge difference in his confidence levels, and at home we no longer see his Sunday night panic attacks. This requested increase is necessary. I was very glad to hear about the state sending $1.1 million in more education funding to the students, but now I hear that this money may be used to free up other money for town expenses, and apparently there's a lot of people interested in having the budget remain the same as last year. The state's giving the money because they see that our district is high need, and that the students and the money that is meant for the students can just be leveled and funds can be siphoned off for other purposes. When we prevent and fix issues in our schools, the effects will ripple up through the community. So I'm asking you to approve the request of increase in funding for additional professional level BCBA and adequate services for those who need it.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. It's been a while.
It sure has. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kia Burton King. I reside at 27 Riverside Drive. That's Greenfield Gardens. Mine is short and sweet. I'll probably return with a more eloquent thing in following meetings. But I just wanted to get clarification. Well, I noticed the reductions to the budget, their elimination of 2 bus routes that would save the district, I guess, $140,000. It doesn't say which bus routes, but I'm just going to go out and make an assumption that it'll probably be the bus routes that affect my child who attends Newton School and the children that live in my neighborhood. And I'll just make that assumption because it's always a bus route that's a hot topic. So I'm just here to advocate that if that is the case, then you not eliminate those 2 bus routes, especially without fixing the sidewalks and completing the route. I challenge each of you to walk from my house, 27 Riverside Drive, to Newton. There are 2 routes. And if you are about my child's size and little children's size, either one of those are problematic. Homeowners, if you take the Elm Street route, don't always shovel. There's no crosswalk if you're coming from up at the top of Forbes and walking all the way down. And if you are going on the street, I forget the name, I'm sorry, that the radio station is on, there are no complete sidewalks. So I would advocate that you either not eliminate those, or you roll out a program to phase it out that would include like bringing back the walking school bus and really having conversations with families that affects. And then my other thing is I'm looking for clarification on what will happen with Green River next year. I sat on a STAR committee with several of you up here, and we made recommendations in which some were adopted, and we brought the 4th grade back to elementary, and one of our other suggestions was to possibly reopen Green River as elementary, which would alleviate a lot of the, I don't want to say overpopulation, but just a lot of my child's school is stuffed. All the elementary schools are stuffed. I'm hearing every day of our great principals are finding, creative ways to make do with the space they have. When Newton needed new modulars, we replaced what was there, and I always ask the question, well, why don't we add to instead of, just putting back what was already there. So I just want to advocate, I guess, for clarity on what the plan is with Green River. I hear all types of stories, so I just I'm hoping that there's some sort of direction or guidance, and I'm hoping that it goes towards elementary school. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and thank you thank you ahead of time for all the work that you have done and will do for this budget and for our kids.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment now, either as public comment or through public hearing? Hi.
Hi, this is my first time ever here. My name is
Welcome.
Mackenzie Webb. I am at 44 Grove Street in Greenfield. I also do have a child that does ride on the Greenfield Gardens bus, and we were able to get a stop towards the end of our street for sidewalk issues. We actually almost had a kid today at the end of our road that got almost hit by a bus with a parent walking across the street. So it's a very safety concern in our area. Lots of homeowners who rent, who don't have the funds or time or other properties to get to and clear their sidewalks properly is a really, really big concern where we live. I do have, again, clarification. All of our elementary schools are overcrowding. All of our teachers and principals are losing space or finding creative ways. And I know Green River would make a great place to maybe redistrict. We need to start looking at the bigger picture. We have a lot more younger classroom kids coming up in larger sizes that are staying larger. They're not getting smaller. We have lots of new families wanting to move into this wonderful town because we do offer such a great elementary school program. And with them doing that, we just are running out of space, and it's very obvious when you walk into a school and you no longer have a library because it's a computer room, and you no longer have a computer room because it's now a classroom, and you possibly no longer have a teacher's lounge because that also needs to be a classroom, and you put stuff outside for kids to learn on. So you get creative and make more room, and it's sad to see an abandoned building that we could be using as a K-4 to alleviate some of the pressure. And it's not just Newton, it's not just a Discovery School, and it's not just Federal Street. It's all three of them are running out of space. We can't make more space where there is no space. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything you guys do. I'm sure this is not easy.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to give a general public comment or a comment as part of the public hearing for the FY20 budget? Okay, seeing none, as I mentioned, we will continue on with the budget presentation and then open up for additional public hearing if there are folks that would like to comment after the presentation. We do have one quick item to refer to subcommittee at this time. This is review of the potential for emergency sheltering at school buildings. This is a topic that has been popping up at different levels in Greenfield, at the council, at some, I believe, at the Human Rights Commission, and potentially in other areas. And the superintendent requested that we have the Health and Safety Subcommittee review this topic, and in order to do so, I'd like a referral from the committee to do so. So at this time, I would request a motion to refer emergency sheltering at school buildings to the Health and Safety Subcommittee. So moved. And it's moved by member Karen. Is that a second? Yes. Second by member Alexander. Thank you so much. Any conversation on this? Should be pretty simple. Okay. Great. All those in favor? Aye. Member Hollins, what is your vote?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Great, we will move on to the FY20 budget presentation. All set, I will yield the floor to the superintendent. Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. Good evening to everybody here in the room. Thanks for those of you that came out. Thank you for those of you, we're not supposed to address people that speak at public comment directly by policy, but I always appreciate when people say, I'm coming for the first time. I wish to be involved and make my voice heard to the committee. Parents have reached out to me with some responses, and I always appreciate hearing from folks. So thank you to those of you that are watching at home, that are following along, and that are caring about what education looks like here in Greenfield. Before we talk about the budget tonight, I have been asked to just give a brief update on the weather-related information, so I will start there. I feel a bit like the dance between the budget and the weatherman, but we did have a lot of wind gusting today. Any of you that traveled around Greenfield today, you may have experienced power outages. We did have 2 schools that experienced some brief power outage issues today. Newton School did have some sporadic outages, not the whole building, but some loss of power to some portions of the building. And they were, at the advice of the fire department, asked to leave the building briefly so that the building could be inspected. And the issue was quickly addressed, and I appreciate the fire department's work to do that so quickly. And then children were brought back into the building. It was safe, and it is fine. There was a slight issue with the furnace that is being addressed, but there is working heat in the building now. We do, at this time, anticipate there being school at Newton School tomorrow, but please note that the weather is extremely unpredictable right now, and some of these wind gusts are 60, 70 miles per hour, and we are watching closely. So if we do have power outages or furnace outages overnight, we would make families aware through the emergency broadcast system, the text, email, alert, and phone call. It is possible that it could affect only one school, and if that were the case, then we would try as much as possible to hold school in the other buildings that were not affected. The Greenfield Middle School did have some temporary power outages, the lights and the computers today. Some of you were in the building with us when that happened, but the power has been restored there, and we expect that that's going to be functional tomorrow as well. So just to make you aware, we're keeping an eye on it, and we'll notify parents. We do try to alert parents in sort of more real time, but today, with some of the events going on, I'm just making this announcement tonight. So we'll turn now to the budget presentation, and I apologize to those of you in the room that we don't have it on the wall, but looking around, it does look like they're mostly copies. If anybody needs, I have one extra one up here, if anyone wants mine. So this year's budget presentation is fairly straightforward. And the reason for that is that this year's budget is not incredibly complicated, in that really what we're trying to do is preserve the level of services that we had last year, again next year, and we're trying to make some modest increases in the areas that you've heard a couple of people mention tonight at public comment. And the main thing that the public needs to understand is that it costs us more to operate the same program that we're running this year next year. And that's because costs go up, and many of these costs are outside of the control of the school district. And these things do include costs that the town absorbs, like insurance. They also include costs like transportation and out-of-district placements, where the cost is determined by somebody else, and then the school district essentially foots the bill for that. Greenfield does an excellent job of protecting the arts, protecting excellent teachers and good class size, and protecting things that we care about for our students. Having said that, the budget is a morals document, a value document, and what it means is that there are difficult decisions. I wish that we were bringing forward a budget that I could say there are no compromises. That is not the case. In any budget cycle, there are difficult decisions, and I hope that this night's presentation is the beginning of a dialogue and not an end point. So some parents have reached out to me and they've said, I'd like to see more of, and then they've named an area in which they'd like to see more of something. I will tell you that no parent has reached out to me and said, please cut X, or I wish there were less of something. So in general, when I put forward a budget, the response that I hear is that parents and community members are interested in investing even more in our schools, and they support what's happening. Having said that, we are aware that this is a community that needs to be able to afford a budget, and so we put forward the best recommendation that I can as superintendent stand behind and say that we are doing what we can for our students. And my recommendations come directly from the principals and the department heads and their observations and needs in their buildings. We had a meeting again today with every single member of the Greenfield Public Schools administrative team, because this document, while it's not perfect, it represents our best effort to bring forward something that everyone can live with. There are definitely things that have been left out of this budget that have been requested. And I will say that right off the bat, because I think there were 20 plus positions requested, and a handful of those are funded in this budget. But again, our primary purpose in this year's budget is to keep the level of services that we had last year, which will cost us a significant amount more to provide again next year. So I'll take you through your packet. And we start with our enrollment. This is the foundation enrollment. This is calculated by the Department of Education. It's calculated on October 1st every year, and there are different types of enrollment. This is a foundation enrollment. But as you've heard from many people tonight, we are growing. And we are growing at a time that many neighboring areas are declining in their enrollment. And this is important because it means we have to get creative, but it's a good problem to have. People are here in Greenfield, we have growing enrollment, and we have people deciding to stay here in Greenfield. And that bodes well long-term for the success and stability of our district. On the second slide, you have the October 1st enrollment from this year, which was 1,745, and that enrollment is expected to be about 50 students higher for the fall, right around 1,795 for the fall of next year, okay? So again, continuing to see an increased enrollment and an increased trend towards more students here in Greenfield. And you see the breakdown there across the buildings we see in the district. On the next slide, you see a photo of one of our classrooms. This is a photograph from Newton School, and we are sharing with you a glimpse into a classroom teacher's life. We are talking about children. We are talking about teachers who give quite a lot to this profession, and we like to remind you that we're not talking about school buildings, we're talking about children and their future. The next slide is an analysis of per pupil spending. And our business manager can comment more on this, but this is essentially a comparison of how much communities spend for each child, so looking at the total budget and then dividing by the number of children in your district, and it gives you a per pupil amount. FY17 is the most current data that's available through the Department of Education, because it's the last completed year that's been verified by the department. And you can see that our per pupil spending on this nears the bottom of this particular group of analysis of districts, because the amount that people spend in each community varies quite significantly, and how much it costs to educate a student depends on a number of factors. So you can see how we stack up compared to other communities in terms of our per pupil spending. I think that's important because we're not spending exorbitantly in Greenfield, and we certainly are good at in economizing and stretching the dollar. And that's important when you think about what do we invest in our students and how far do we go and where do we want to be as a community. On the next slide, you have a picture of Miss Templeton at the middle school, and this is a photograph of band practice in action. We have a wonderful music program here, not just at the middle school, but throughout our schools. We build and sustain a musical program that really is the reason for many students that they love school. And I'm proud of that, and I want to celebrate that because it helps students choose Greenfield, choose to stay in Greenfield and come to Greenfield from neighboring communities. So that takes us to our next slide, which is about choice. We talk a lot about choicing into Greenfield, students staying in Greenfield. At the top, you have a count from fiscal year 18, so last school year, and we had just about 95.8, right? So 96 students choicing in, and this year that number is 103, I think. So that's continuing to climb. And a couple of things you need to know about school choice. One is that when children choice into Greenfield, they bring dollars with them that come to the community and help us cover the costs of educating that student. The second is that we only give those seats up if there's not already a Greenfield resident in that seat. So our seats go to Greenfield students first. But if there's already a teacher, already a classroom, and we have an empty seat, we let another student from a neighboring community come into that seat. And the third thing is that the school committee caps or approves the number of seats available each year. So the principals and administration go through the process of saying how many seats we might have in Newton School in kindergarten, in Federal Street at 2nd grade, and the high school in 8th grade. And then the committee approves or caps those number of seats. So there's an upper limit on how much revenue we can take in through school choice, and also how much we can expand, which has to do with how much room we have in many cases. So typically we have all of our school choice seats filled, and there's often a waiting list or a lottery, and usually there's more interest in our choice seats than we have available. The next slide is a photograph taken from, I believe, a PE class. You see Coach Hickey in the background at the middle school, and again highlighting the fact that in this budget, we have tried to take care of a lot of different kinds of needs of students, which includes physical wellness, health and wellness, safety, and a program that's well-rounded. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the revenue increases. For those of you who may not know, the state has different ways of supporting communities, and the Chapter 70 funding is earmarked for education. The governor's proposal includes a projected increase, and we're expecting to receive right around $1.1 million in Chapter 70 funds for education. That's expected to come to Greenfield. And that can go to a number of different educational costs. Some of those costs are borne on the city side. Some of those are borne directly in the operational costs, paying for salaries, paying for textbooks, sending children on field trips, keeping art teachers. Those are all things that Chapter 70 funding goes directly to. And we're going to talk a lot about this number because every year it seems that we're about $800,000 to $1 million off from the budget number that really is the amount that this community seems to want to be funding our schools with. And we continue to have a dialogue about how do we reach the right balance there? How do we be affordable? At the same time, how do we make sure that children in our schools are getting both the state requirements and what we know is best for them? So that number is an important one to hang on to. As we move through the slides, we talk a little bit about the process. I won't bore you with the details, but for those of us on the committee, this evening tonight is, I'm not on the committee, but sitting up here with the committee. This evening is one of many, many, many bites at the apple about the budget. For the public, it may look like that, there's one meeting and that's sort of it. But in reality, this has been going on for a long time and continues for a fair amount of time. So somebody wrote to me and said, well, I haven't had an opportunity, to comment before the hearing tonight. And I think felt a bit disillusioned about that. The truth is, the hearing is a great chance for you to give your input. There is no vote tonight. The committee will vote on March 7th, but if you have feedback, you can speak it again tonight. You can get it to me. You can email the committee. There's actually a period of time here, and the charter is set up to allow that period of feedback. So we're following the charter timeline. So you can see that 2-page of timeline helps take you through with a vote and action by May of this coming year. Just going a little bit through the parallel state process, we've already had the governor's budget. House 1 comes out in April, and then the Senate budget later in May. So we'll have clearer sense of the revenue. But again, we are looking at I won't say a windfall, but a significant increase this year that we have not seen historically. The increases in Chapter 70 funding in the last 5 years that I've been here have been on the order of $10,000 to $20,000 in a given year. $1.1 million is a very significant difference in the amount of funding that is projected to be received by Greenfield. On the next slide, you have a look at where are the increases coming from. All right, so $1 million is a lot of money. Where would that go to, and what are the increases really? And the thing folks need to understand is that the salary and contractual obligations that we have, just paying people, the increases that are set into the teacher's contract, the paraprofessional's contract, the custodian's contract, the admin assistant's contract, the food service worker's contract, those take up a significant amount of funds because we are a large employer and we have over 400 employees, and we have to continue to meet those obligations to stay competitive. So that is a significant portion of the budget. Most of our budget, over 80%, is people, their salaries. So you can't find an extra efficiency there. You can't sort of change that too much. A lot of that is quite fixed. So this slide is a bit blurry. The other two are transportation and special education. And those are the big three that we're always talking about: contractual obligations, transportation, and special education. All right, so on the next page, we start to get into a little bit, okay, what is in this budget? And what you see on this next slide are some of the new positions. So we have found that we need to add a special education teacher in the district, specifically at Newton School, to come into and to continue to be in compliance with some of the regulations. IEPs are very specific. They are not optional. They tell you how many hours of service you're going to give, and they're there for a reason, and we are obligated to meet them. And we need to add a teacher in order to continue to meet them at Newton. You heard earlier this evening conversation about behavioral support. A BCBA stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst, and we are looking to add that level of behavioral support in our district. And we're looking to add somebody that can provide not just the direct services, but some training and support to our instructional assistants, to our behaviorists in the district, and to begin to build that scaffolding. The design we have right now lets us do that in design, but in practicality, they're doing so much direct support to students that while we have some great people, their hours are already dedicated, and so we need to get a little bit more staff to be able to bring that to scale. Next, we're looking at a speech and language pathology assistant, SLPA. Again, this has to do with providing services that we're required to provide to students. And then the next three positions are by vote of this committee. So we brought forward a proposal for an alternative high school program that would help some of our students increase our graduation rate, provide an alternative pathway, help some of our students that are ready to get out into the community, are interested in building career-ready skills, and give them an alternative program. This committee voted an initial proposal that brought forward actually a more expanded version than this, and what you see here is a little bit scaled back. So it brings forward a teacher, a paraprofessional, and it would be housed at the Green River School, and it would include a custodian to maintain that facility. So those three positions would support the vote that this committee took. Alternately, that program could be housed in an alternate location if it was necessary to do so, or for example, if the Green River building didn't have the heating system completed in time, or if there was ongoing construction there, which has been the case, we have considered, and the high school principal has considered ways that we might house that at the high school as an alternative program if necessary. On the next page, you have a few other changes that were made, and there are changes to last year's budget that are included in the projected FY20 budget. This includes an adjustment to the rate of pay for substitute teachers. If any teachers are watching tonight, they will tell you that the number one concern they face is when if they're home or have the stomach bug, there sometimes is nobody to come in and watch their class. As a result, we have teachers that come to school when they should not be in school. Nobody wants them there, but they do come when those kinds of concerns crop up. up because we need to be able to attract substitute teachers here to our district, and we need to stay competitive. And the sub rate right now is about $70 for a day of work, and you know, when you break that down by the number of hours, we're talking about less than minimum wage, and it's challenging. It's challenging to find good people to take care of our children when that's where we are. So a couple of years ago, this committee approved a rate increase, and we're looking to add a little bit to that line so we can pay teachers, substitute teachers a little bit more and have good people in the buildings. There's a salary adjustment for contracts that the business manager will explain. In essence, this allows teachers who get education credits during the year to move from, if they get a master's and then they earn enough credits to get a master's plus 30, there's a provision in the contract. And so that needed to be included in the contract. It's a contractual obligation. It's not really new. It just needed to be reflected in there. We always have transportation increases. We'll talk about busing. You see an increase of $95,000 for transportation in here. That should be higher. It should be a lot higher. But we've tried to make it a more manageable impact to this year's budget by the discussion about reducing 2 buses. I'll tell you right now, I would like to see all of our buses. The reason we have those buses right now is because there are safety concerns with those children not being on a bus. And this is an example of one of the places where we feel that we need the committee to give some guidance, and we'll work within it. Because there hasn't been yet a clear vote of the committee in terms of a bottom line dollar amount, it has been hard to know exactly where to prioritize some of the staffing and resources that are in this budget. So I look forward to that conversation tonight. And then there's been another increase in out-of-district tuition. Again, these are not rates that anyone here in Greenfield sets. And when a student requires out-of-district tuition, it's by vote of a team that's looking at that student and their needs. And those costs are determined elsewhere and then passed on to Greenfield. And they can go up quite sharply. We've talked about this many times here, but a student could be $40,000 for 1 year at a private placement, or they could be upwards of $200,000 per year per student at a private placement. Many of them are very medically involved. So while it's a very small portion of our actual students, about 30 students in the district, the dollar value is very high, and they're very volatile because you can have somebody move in who that is a service that they need, and then Greenfield becomes fiscally responsible. And then there's a line here for other needs not presented, and I'm just going to, I don't know if I can read it to you while I'm doing this, but there's a significant list of needs that were presented by the principals that are not included. And I just want to make the viewing public aware that the principals are advocating for their buildings, as well they should, and we would like to bring forward all of those requests. But when there is discussion about a budget increase, the public has to know that this is not a wish list. This is not everything that the schools want. It's not everything that the superintendent wants, and it is an attempt to put forward only those most critical needs, even though there are many more that we think would be great. So that takes you through some of the changes between last year's budget to this in terms of additions. On the second page, we'll talk a little bit about how we can save some money, which is also important, and we don't just add, we also try to be creative. So the first is an elimination of paraprofessionals, and we don't do this lightly because, as you've heard tonight, they are important and they work extremely well with our teachers, and we appreciate their work. We have 4 positions where we have a current vacancy, and we feel that we can eliminate the position that's currently vacant and then work within our district to reprioritize. And that's our best estimate at this point, because the position, as I said, is currently vacant. So that is one area that we can save. Sometimes we cannot make that because it's a student that requires a one-on-one aid, for example, or there's other requirements, in which case we wouldn't be able to do this. But we're proposing to eliminate 4 paraprofessionals in the district. The next proposal is to eliminate before-school care. This is an important topic, and people have asked a lot of questions, so I'll just try to clarify a little bit. First, this does not apply to the Greenfield Recreation After-School Program, the GRASP program, so we're not talking about eliminating the GRASP program. The rec department runs that program. They've run it well. Parents have been very happy with it. This does not affect that. But at some of our buildings, we provide staff just prior to drop-off time. And we would, in this proposal, we would eliminate that service to families. So if you are a family that has an issue getting to work, you drop off your child just slightly before the school day, and then you go to work yourself, this will be an important line to you. And again, these are difficult trade-offs, so we don't say this lightly. It's not because we don't value any group of families. It's because we're trying to make sure the dollars go directly into the classroom and into that classroom instruction. The next is to eliminate 2 bus routes, and I suspect we'll spend a lot of time talking about this. If funding were available, I think the district would find that a longer-term solution that looked at busing would be useful, and we are in fact working on that walk-to-school program, and I think our new transportation director has some great ideas. So this proposal is one way that we could begin to address the transportation costs, but perhaps there are other ways as well. And lastly, we are looking at saving some money through bringing the busing, for example, our McKinney-Vento students, some of our small vans, not the Kosmeskis buses. We're not looking to take those in-house, but some of the busing that we contract to another vendor, and it's we think there's significant savings if we were to put forward a proposal to bring those buses back in district through a lease program. So that list right there saves $440,000 to the district, and we wanted to make you aware of those proposals. The next slide talks a little bit about teacher salary, and you can see our average class size is on the high side, and our teacher salary is low for our region. And these are important factors because we need to attract and keep good teachers, and we want to make sure that we remain competitive so that good teachers, once they're here, stay here, and we want to make sure our students are getting the best possible experience. The next slide talks about the student. Mayor, do we need to attend to the flashing lights outside? Is there anything? Okay. Mayor says no.
Unless you're expecting later.
Not yet.
I mean.
The next slide talks about economically disadvantaged and high-need students, and we do have a significant portion, the majority of our students here in Greenfield are high needs, and we have a very significant population of economically disadvantaged students. A number of our schools are also practicing trauma-informed practices, and it's very important to us that we are providing an environment that is not just supportive, but is really addressing the needs of this student population. It's the majority of our students. So what is not in this budget? It's important to know that there are things that we've talked about that the public should be aware are not included. So at Four Corners, we are projecting a need for another 4th grade teacher. This budget does not include a 4th grade teacher in addition to the current staffing. What that means is that all the students would move up and there would be a 4th grade teacher, but we would have to essentially cap incoming kindergarten. So a teacher would have to move grades so that there would be a 4th grade teacher, but we would have to eliminate one section of kindergarten. And typically, Four Corners is one place where families have found that kindergarten is a good entry point. Families that might be new to the district like to come in kindergarten and tend to stay through elementary school, and that has been one area that a family's choice in, not just at Four Corners, but to some of our other elementary schools as well. In that school in particular, we would have to cap it to accommodate that enrollment increase as they move through the grades. And I'll let the business manager talk about this entire paragraph, explanation one, and how the budget does not contain this. Steve, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll briefly touch on this. Through how the funding of contractual increases works in Greenfield, it's basically a situation where in this FY19 budget, we will put in step increases for FY19.
Your mic.
Oh, I'm not plugged in, sorry. Is that better? There we go. Sorry about that. So in this budget, because we're in the middle of a contract with, say, the teachers, so what we have now is we will put in this budget contractual increases, meaning step raises for teachers. Once we get a contract for FY20, 21, 22 with the teachers, we will apply to the city for the reserve fund in order to pay for the step increase, usually say at 2%. And then in FY21, all that cost will catch up to us. And what will happen is that we will have to pay the step increase as well as the COLA increase, or the 2% increase. So that 2% compounds on itself for 2 years, and then the step increase is included. So essentially what happens is that, say, a teacher on Master Step 11 is put in this budget at Master Step 11. Next year, they will be put in at Master Step 12, plus the 2% increase, plus the 2% increase. So it'll look like they have a $6,600 salary increase in FY21, or 10%. So how do we remedy this? We have to make sure that we either include in the budget a placeholder for that number, or what we'll have to include is, once we make the application to the city for those funds, that they're added to our base of our budgetary base going forward, so the percentage increases look like they should going forward, without, and not a 10% increase for an individual teacher.
So as we near the end of that presentation, we will note that there's also a handout that Steve has prepared, which was sent to the committee and is available publicly here in the room, which we can talk about if folks have questions on that, and I'll allow Steve to work through that. The budget itself is very detailed. I didn't go through each line tonight, but it is on the gpsk12.org website. It is here in the room. People are looking at it. It is about 35 pages of single-space line items. And what it goes through is each school, each position, each teacher, each paraprofessional, each custodian. So it's publicly available, and if people have questions about it, we've provided the summary of it tonight, but obviously, if there are questions, that's what we're here to talk about. So that concludes my portion. I will ask Steve to just talk briefly about this document, the blue and yellow document that the committee has. Steve.
Okay. Basically what this is kind of the highlights of the budget, and some information that you should be aware of going forward. So it's broken up into several points from 1 to 8, so it's not that long, and some of it has already been covered in the budget. For example, the per pupil expenditure. Basically, the per pupil expenditure is one of the lowest in the area at $14,659, and that was in the presentation. Again, the average teacher salary and class size was handled in the budget presentation. As well as the economically disadvantaged and high-need students. I want to emphasize this one in the fact that along with low per-pupil spending, the needs are very great. 49% economically disadvantaged, 55.7% high needs. So there are students in this district, and a great number of them, who really need the services, need the help, and are in dire need of some little bit of extra, which is reflected in those percentages. The next one. Number 4, funding above minimum. All Franklin County school districts fund above minimum, including Greenfield. So how do we look at this metric going forward? The metric, the best way to compare apples to apples is how much above net school spending compared to the required net school spending by percentage-wise are we talking about? So, for example, Rowe is number 1 in Franklin County. They spend 64.2% above net school spending as a percentage of their required. Amherst Pelham is about 26%. Ralph C. Mahar is about 23%. Greenfield is 14.4%, and the only 2 lower ones are Sunderland at 6% and Orange at 3%. So, you know, it's you have the high need and then the spending issue going forward. So, and these are facts. These are all this is all information given out by DESE based upon their end of the year report, and every single piece of information amongst the thousands of pieces of information that they collect every single year. So these aren't, you know, something that we cooked up in the lab here. We just are giving you information that's readily available on the DESE website. Number 5, Greenfield is the only Franklin County school district that's focused targeted support. Again, that's due to the high need population, as well as funding, and basically what they're saying is, look, you need to do a little more to go ahead and bring your schools up to meeting target. Number 6. This is the biggest central issue that you're facing this year in the FY20 budget. We're all facing this this year in the FY20 budget. Last year, we used revolving funds to the tune of $2.856 million. In order to bring that spending in line with the current school committee policy, which requires us to spend only up to the prior year revenue, we had to discount our usage of revolving funds by the tune of $808,000. That is a large chunk of money. What happens here is that the reliance on one-time revenues for ongoing expenses creates this funding cliff. If it's not addressed now, it will be an even bigger problem in FY21. You know, so it's one of those things where you as a committee need to decide, do you want to bite the bullet? Do you want to have some sort of measured approach to this? Or do you just want to put it off? I would recommend not putting it off. I would recommend dealing with this in some fashion because those revenues won't be there forever. Basically, we relied last year on savings. That savings is gone, and now we're moving towards using only revenues that we have every single year coming in, but that gap has been formed, that funding cliff has been formed, and we'll need to address that somehow. Basically, number 7 is things you've already seen in the slide. It goes over what this budget is, what it isn't, some increases, as well as some of the decreases. Then the 4th grade teacher, as well as the contract reserve by the city, whereby we don't want to have a 10% increase for some individual teachers, and I think we went over that fairly well Finally, choice and charter. A lot of money goes out for choice and charter. Working on that problem. However, that is a real cost to the city as well as the school district, and it's something to be cognizant of going forward, that we have far more kids leave the district than stay in or come in, and through, I think, some innovative programming or something of that nature, we can really try to tackle, which is being done as we speak. Each year we capture some more folks, but it's an ongoing process. It didn't happen overnight. It's not going to be solved overnight. So those are just some of the challenges facing the FY20 budget.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Any additional comments, Superintendent? Okay, so at this time, let's open up to some questions from committee members. Is there anyone that would like to start? Yes, Member Ekstrom.
I have a number of questions, as I usually do.
Super.
So talking about the grade school, there's one teacher, one para, and a custodian. Is it permissible to not have a nurse at a public school? I don't know.
We would have to repurpose some existing staff in the district and have them share. So it's not that there would be no nurse coverage, but there would not be a full-time nurse assigned to that school. Okay. And it would depend on the actual medical needs of the students in that program, the extent that they need medical services.
Yeah. And Steve, this one's probably for you. This, the enrollment for special populations by district, and you may not know this answer, so okay. If you don't, that's fine. Are these numbers that we're looking at, the 17% with students with disabilities, high needs, English language, economically disadvantaged, the whole thing, is this pretty static? Or is this an increase over, say, 5 years ago? And I guess the point that I'm getting at is, are these percentages going to increase, say, in 1920 with a measurable increase, I guess?
They're static, but they regularly increase, not by tremendous amounts of percentages, but they do creep up 0.5%, 1% every year.
Okay, so that's actually something to be aware of when we're doing this. What else? Shoot. All right, well, I'll get right into the school busing if we want to do it.
Can I just comment on student needs? We've heard from our Pupil Services Director talking about English language learners in the past, and that's one where our population has shifted rather dramatically. So there are principals in this room that will talk about the enrollment in their building when they first began principal of the school and how drastically different that looks now. And that has, I would say there are years that has absolutely doubled within one school year. So that population has shifted rather rapidly, whereas the others have been more of a steady continual increase.
I am interested in talking about busing, so we can just get that started. Where are the routes that we're thinking about eliminating? Or whatever the case may be.
Come on down.
Oh, Steve, don't go anywhere. There's going to be more for you.
I was
Yeah,
right out the back.
just stay there. There's 2 chairs. This is actually great. I am also interested in hearing more specifics about what the routes are, about how many students and families we're impacting, et cetera. So,
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Ed Voudrin, Transportation Coordinator for Greenfield Public Schools. Hello. This is something that we've been looking at since day one when I got on the treadmill. It looks like the buses would be cut for the people from 1.5 miles and under to this general school areas, which means it looks like, and I got to be up front, Oak Courts, Greenfield Gardens, those are the areas. And I don't agree with it. Primarily because what we're going to do is we're going to open a huge flower of liability because of the areas they have to walk. We're not prepared to walk them in it. It's going to cost us in crossing guards. It's probably going to cost us in extra patrols from the police department if we can get them, which is a stressor for them also. And continually looking at traffic patterns, which I don't have a firm grip on right now because I don't know which kids are going to walk where. And that's really up to the parents, what kind of cooperation we get from them when we put them out on the street. And I just have to add a caveat to that kind of worries me the most. In 1 week's time, reported vehicles passing buses with all their lights on, kids getting on or off the bus was 18 in 1 week. So that is tough enough to deal with just on the buses. And when we start putting the kids out walking to school, all of a sudden, it's going to be a real challenge for all of us. And we have to prepare for that. And I'm worried about injuries and liability in that regard.
So I guess one of the things that comes to mind is we've heard quite a bit, or more than one or two times, about concerns with attendance dropping or students arriving late at Newton for whatever reason that may be. And it seems to me that we're going to open ourselves up to more of that if there isn't transportation. And truth of the matter is, there isn't Newton, where Newton is located isn't conducive to people walking. It just isn't. I mean, it's not directly in a neighborhood like Four Corners or Federal Street is. And so is there, and I have no doubt that you've done your due diligence and all of those things, but are there other alternatives to doing that? And I guess the second part of my question is, if it is that we're going to have to increase to a walking bus, or the police department is going to have to do increased whatever, is it that the savings isn't as dramatic as it appears when we're looking at it on paper?
That is correct. And that is in good weather. And in foggy, rainy weather and icy and snow weather, it just gets worse and is compounded. We are continually looking at alternatives to cutting buses right now. Very active on it, working with Steve and the rest of the school process. And so I don't think at this point we're ready to cut 2 buses and be safely doing it.
And so I guess this is a follow-up. Does within district school choice have an impact on how many buses are going where?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Okay. A pretty significant impact?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Before you continue with any other questions, are there any other questions for Ed related to transportation? I see Katie, Member Karen first, and then I see the mayor.
Have there, again, I'm assuming that this is the answer is yes, you've thought about this, thinking about lowering our bus counts to the other schools where children are choosing not to ride the bus even though it's available to them. Is there a way to make that I don't know how you would do it. Sign a contract, I choose not to use the bus this entire year so we can combine routes for other buildings, because I often see small buses not as full going to Four Corners, which happens to be where my kids go, and fuller buses going to Newton because they don't have the ability to walk the way Four Corners students do. Is there a way to work that out?
Because of the limited number of smaller buses we have and where they have to pick up and what time they have to deliver, it really becomes a problem. You start to get jammed up. Mm-hmm. When you see the full buses, that's because that one bus can pick up that many kids in that area to a particular school. Then they got to turn around and come back and do some more in another area. And that one bus you might see that only has a few has got to go back out, and the next round will be full. So it's hard when you're looking at it.
Yeah.
You see one thing and it's really something else.
Well, I do just know a lot of parents opt not to use the bus specifically at Four Corners. I don't know the parents at Federal Street. They're just, no, I'll just drive. And it's been a problem for us because of the parking problem at Four Corners. There's no parking because everybody's choosing to drive. So that's what I'm wondering.
There's a multitude of compounded problems in regard to that, but I can tell you our small buses are busy.
Yeah.
You might see 3 or 4 kids getting off, and the next time they're to their max.
Good.
And 15 minutes later. It's just where they got to pick up and how they have to deliver.
Mayor Martin?
I guess I was thinking.
Microphone? Could you engage your microphone? Sure. Thank you.
So you do want to hear what I'm going to say. So the following up on what Katie said, are inter-district choice causing issues with transportation?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so.
Yeah, and it's a moving target all the time.
Yeah, so are we dealing with a policy change for inter-district choicing, or transportation issues with elimination of a bus route, or increased funds needed to purchase bus route people, drivers and vehicles?
What we're looking at, and it's across the board, I took a really hard look and reported in details to the financial officer, who spoke with the superintendent, and what if we were to capture the transportation that's going out of district and in district, there could be a huge savings by taking it and running with it from within.
Okay, so that's what I need the clarification on. So I'm talking within the city of Greenfield, going from one school to another school, not from Greenfield to another district in another town or city.
Okay.
Okay, so it's just within town. So are we picking up people who live on Woodard Road to bring them to Four Corners, and picking up people who live in the Meadows to go to Federal Street?
No. The way it runs is when the buses are out there, they pick up the children on a path to the schools that they're going to. Okay, then they'll turn around and they'll get the next group going maybe even to another school. So they're not mixing them all up in one bus running around with 3 kids on it.
No.
We're trying to get them picked in the proper area, delivered to the proper schools.
And the superintendent has an addition.
So there has been a little bit of a practice shift in this area, Mayor. So I think to your point, so to clarify, we're talking about students who live in Greenfield who maybe my neighborhood school is Federal Street, but maybe I want to go to Newton School because I want to benefit from the expanded learning time. So that's what we call intra-district choice, or students living within Greenfield, but they're not going to their neighborhood school. So the first thing we like to say is we encourage families to go to their neighborhood school whenever possible. It's closer, we think it builds good community, and we want families to feel connected to their school. But for whatever reason, they might choose to go to a different school. So I think prior to my time in Greenfield, I can't speak to the philosophy about it, but I can say that there were students that were riding buses that were going to a school that was their choice school. And maybe there was a route going that way, but they were certainly on a school bus. So one of our efforts over time to reduce the transportation cost has been to look at students who are not going to their neighborhood school, who might be able to walk to their neighborhood school, but are instead riding a school bus to a different school in Greenfield. And what we've been telling is any family that chooses inter-district choice, so if they come in and they come to the registrar and they say, my home school is Four Corners, but I want to go to Federal Street, then we say to them, transportation is your responsibility. Okay, so the difficulty that we encounter is that there are families who, when they enroll their child in Greenfield Public Schools, they may have had a different arrangement. And so we are sort of working through that process with all new families who send their child to a school that's not their neighborhood school, to say, if we provide a neighborhood school for every family in Greenfield, if you're choosing to go somewhere different, you're essentially responsible for getting your child there. I do want to comment that there is another perspective to that, though, which is that means that families that have access to vehicles or a way to transport their children have more choices in Greenfield than families who don't have access to transportation. So that has been an ongoing conversation, but for budgetary reasons, we have asked families that are not choosing their neighborhood school to provide their own transportation. It's a little tricky to enforce that, but that has been something that Ed's been looking at closely. Does that answer your question, Mayor?
It does. It does. Thank you very much. And so I guess one of the factors is income, family income decides transportation. I think we were paying a parent to drive their child.
We do pay some parents, and this is very specific instances in which we're talking generally about out-of-district transportation, so like a child who would be eligible for a special ed small bus, but instead elects to drive their child to a program placement, and those cases are very few. They're very specific instances, and it's when the child has an IEP that demands it, basically. Otherwise, we're not paying parents to drive their child just to second grade at Federal Street.
But how do parents know? Is it possible to do it in town if parents wanted to drive their child? I mean, they could call a Uber or a Lyft or have your neighbor take them, and if they were receiving some compensation, then their child could go to any school in Greenfield.
That is not the arrangement we have right now. So if that was something that the committee wanted to take up, but that's not an arrangement we have.
Okay.
If I could ask just one more thing.
I was going to ask one more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
There's $70,000 allocated to the school department for transportation. Is that the amount of money that would that help with buying vans and training drivers or buying a van with camera and so on? Or, I'm just wondering why the school department hasn't utilized those funds.
That's what it's for, purchasing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And because we haven't purchased anything yet, because we've been taking a real hard look on everything that's going on, I've been doing an assessment of what we have, you know, what is still good, what is being inspected, what is being repaired, and what isn't. In other words,
Sure.
I've had to do an assessment, and I think we're coming up with a final plan.
Yeah, I think the money's was appropriated in fiscal 16.
All I can tell you.
Waiting for you.
Thank you. Well, we're almost through the total assessment.
We will spend it.
So there has been a shortage of CDL drivers and 7D drivers. So one of the reasons that has been waiting is that there haven't, if we had a Bluebird brand new school bus, there has been a shortage. Ed's been focusing really on bringing in the appropriate staff and training additional staff. We've had monitors on buses. We've been getting drivers in, and we're building relationships between kids and monitors and staff and getting them trained up. But specifically to your point, we had a meeting earlier today talking about could we purchase a school bus and use it for runs that are closer to the school, for example, looking at these two buses that we're talking about tonight, and keep it in the district, because a route is a route. So when you're contracting a route with a bus company, you're paying a flat price for a route. And even if that route is very close to the school, the cost is very high. So that's a great point, Mayor, and we're looking at exactly that kind of a thing. If we could find a driver and buy a bus and keep it in-house. And then the other plan for the smaller buses is even more extensive, and I think would realize some real savings.
The only thing I wanted to say about the inter-district transportation, what happens now is if there's any change at all, it's emailed to my office, and it's printed out as a bus ticket. And then I go to the pupil services. I track it with everybody to make sure that person that had just requested a new trip on one of our buses, that it's appropriate and in their program and so forth. So we just don't have people going on buses for no reason.
I'm sure. A few years ago, one of the solutions we came to was that we would provide pass tickets so that any child from, say, in the high school could go and use any FRTA bus. The FRTA was willing to align their bus routes to meet our sites as well as our schedules for opening and closing school. It seems like that would be quite a bit less expensive and offer all the families a chance to have a free bus ticket they could use 7 days a week. So maybe we should revisit that with the school committee and see if that's, again, a possibility to work together as a community.
Okay. I believe there's a certain age limit in that.
High school certainly must qualify.
Right. And then when you first mentioned it, I looked at it and I agreed. Then you look at the number of kids that start to get into their own cars and so forth. So it'd be a median average of those high school students. You wouldn't capture it all, so it's something we have to look at and make sure that the work that has to go in that, the auditing that has to be done with the bus tickets is appropriate with what we would save.
Right, and And it's not a new idea. It's actually done in cities all across the United States.
Right.
And as close as Boston, Framingham, Fitchburg, and so on. So all those communities are able to give their students tickets to use on the MBTA.
Agreed.
Yes, Member Karen.
I just wanted to make a comment. I look forward to hearing more about your plan because it really is not a great plan, in my opinion, to cut some of our most at-risk students' bus. Like, that just is, I'm always worrying about our most risk students, as we all are, all the time, and these students need our bus very much. So I look forward to more of your great ideas. Thank you.
I have a question related to transportation. Is there any information that you can give related to the cameras or camera purchasing for the SPED?
Yeah, excuse me. That question was brought up way before we even had the incident with Kosmeskis.
Sure.
And we started looking into it at that time before anything happened.
Uh-huh.
And I agree that we should have those cameras on those buses.
Uh-huh.
On the other buses that are already cameraed, that's worked very well for us to record what's going on, understand what's going on, who is who. On the special education buses, where some of the kids are nonverbal, where there could be something going on that a monitor misses, that camera will pick it up. Including maybe an injury that one of the monitors didn't see a kid bang his head or hurt his leg or whatever, it would be on there. So to me, that's really, that group of buses that we now don't have anything on is real important to start working on getting those in there. And it's really a one-time purchase, because if they're put in the buses and you transfer that bus out and get another one, that camera's transferable. So it's not like you're buying them over and over again. It's just we don't have them on those buses. The other thing is, in an accident with those particular buses, you could reel the film back and know exactly what happened, including with nonverbal students, which is really important.
So I just want to clarify that I actually do support purchasing those cameras or finding another avenue to ensure that those cameras are on those buses. I actually feel like it's a shared responsibility with our bus provider. Some of those, I think, are in-district buses. Are they all predominantly?
Yes.
Okay, and so is there a plan? Is that included in this budget for FY20, or is there a plan to spend to purchase this year? Have we run some estimates on any of that?
Yeah, essentially, that is not in the plan for this year. However, Ed, myself, superintendent, we've all been talking about some innovative things to free up some money in order to go ahead and reduce the cost of busing, bring some of it in-house. So within that innovative programming that we're all coming up with, I think we can afford to go ahead and do that.
In this year?
In this
FY19?
FY20.
In FY20, okay. So currently, the purchase of those cameras is not necessarily included in this budget. However, it is the intent of our administrators to make that purchase in FY20. Okay. And I'm assuming that the estimate for that would not qualify as a capital expense. I know that we're sort of in the middle of capital now, but, okay. So that is, yes, you're
Thank
so
you, Madam
eager.
Regarding the cameras again, Steve, is there any account that could be used to purchase cameras now?
We would have to talk, from what I understood, the bus money was frozen at one time, so we'd have to talk with that from the capital expense, and if they would allow a capital expense out of that, we could probably use that money, or I'd have to take a look to see if we could find something.
What's the balance of the special ed revolving?
The special ed revolving account right now,
Since you would be using the cameras for special ed transportation.
I would have to find it. Hold on a second.
So
I think it's $574,120. So if, I think, Ed, you said it was about $20,000?
For the
Cameras?
total number of buses to have them all done, yes.
20,000?
It would be $20,000. If the superintendent didn't disagree and the business manager didn't, I would move tonight to use the $20,000 from that account immediately for cameras for the buses.
Have
it's not-
468.
That isn't, you're not getting cameras because they're special ed students. You're getting cameras because there's all kinds of students on all the
It's
buses.
behavioral? I thought you mentioned behavioral.
These
There's
are,
not special ed students?
it's still a mix on those buses.
But it's still important to have cameras.
Absolutely.
I have a balance of 468.
So we're only off by 120.
Oh, only. I wish my budget was
Okay.
Close enough.
close enough.
So is that something the business manager and the superintendent might entertain? Seems like there are people interested
I mean,
in having
that's a
cameras.
real on-the-fly decision, and it sounds like there's additional discussion to be had.
It does feel a little.
Yes.
I'm fully in support of cameras to ensure the safety of our students, in particular these students, as has been expressed a number of times tonight. I think that's why we're exploring an innovative approach. At the same time, we want to make sure that this is sustainable. And so I would ask that the committee take up our proposal about in-house transportation and the cameras as part of that proposal. And I would like to get this taken care of, and I would like to see cameras on those buses.
Thank you, Superintendent. So Member X, are there any other questions or comments for Ed related to transportation? Okay. It's 8 p.m. I just want to reflect that back to us. We did have a vote at our last meeting saying that we wouldn't go over 10 p.m. We do need a little time for executive session, and I want to touch on as many questions as possible related to the FY20 budget. And also, yes, provide a little space for additional public hearing. So with all of that in mind, let's keep moving forward. Member Ekstrom, you had the floor.
Thank you. Eliminating before-school care, where is that number coming from?
That is before and after school. That's before school care at 3 locations. Right now, that's paid out of a revolving account. And so what would happen is that we use that revolving account to offset some of the expenses for this year.
So
For next year, sorry.
let's make an actual viewable, let's do a demonstration. So we have a para that comes in and works an hour beforehand and does before school care.
Exactly.
Okay. So is it that they won't work that hour later? So let's say we have a para that comes in for 7 hours. Right now, they're coming in for 7 hours and they start an hour before the school starts.
Yes.
So are they no longer going to work that hour, or are they just going to work that hour at the end?
No, they would no longer work that hour because this is above and beyond their regular workday.
Okay. And so that would be at all 3 of the elementary schools?
Yes.
We're talking about. Okay. And actually, I just wanted to, and maybe Jordana, this is for you, or superintendent. When we're looking at, or maybe not, when we look at the average teacher's salary, and that ours is among the lowest in the region, the average class size, do we have a number of newer teachers in comparison to the other districts?
Yeah, I think the superintendent touched on that, is longevity within the position.
Okay.
So what that means is that our teachers skew towards younger, and for whatever reason, they don't stay. They either leave, move on to get out of the profession, whatever happens.
Okay.
But our teachers skew towards the younger, yes.
Okay. I didn't want anyone to assume that we have teachers who've been here for some time and they're not being paid the equivalent of what you would be paid in another district.
All right, I think I'm done. I have a follow-up question to the before-school programming. If we were to take that away, is there some other way that we could provide that service to our community, either with like a small charge, a small fee, or something like that? Is that something that's even allowable under the law?
Yeah, we could look at those kind of alternatives, possibly a partnership with I guess it's the Boys and Girls Club or the rec department, rec department. So yeah, there's alternatives that we could look at.
And do we have a number as to how many students this actually would impact that regularly come to school early?
The last count I saw maybe about 50, 60 students. And it depends on the day too. It's a fluid number.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee members specific to the before school care? Okay, yes, Mayor Martin.
Just that in the earlier iteration of this, I saw before and after school. So we've dropped the after school from the 43,000, but in the one I had last week was before and after school at 43,000.
Yeah, that was a typo on my part. There's only one place with after school care, and that's AEL. So this would capture the most as a before school program.
Okay, so it's the same amount of money.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Looks like you have more questions, Mayor Martin. You want to go ahead?
I want to get out of here by midnight, though.
Well, we've got to get out of here by 10, so
I really don't know where to
talk
start.
fast.
I'm going to start. I'll be scattered starting off, but I think the conversation will lead to some real numbers. Okay. So starting with the average teacher's salary, which is on the end of the page here, we're showing 2,140 students in that particular calculation of 16, and I think it's 16, 17. And then on other calculations, we're showing 1662, 1,700 and a change. So our enrollment, we have some enrollment numbers that you passed out earlier. So we're still around 1,660, is that true? And how do we jump to 2000s?
Yeah, that's based upon the DESE reports. So when they look at a metric, they really sometimes they use all students, sometimes they use out-of-district placement students, sometimes they use just students in district. So the issue is it's not normed across different metrics, but it's normed for that metric. So for example, on a per pupil basis,
yeah, I understand.
Yeah, it's normed so they take the same information from each district so you can compare that district amongst the others.
So the actual number isn't the actual reality. So if we have, we've done the calculation for each school site, and we have X amount of students in our, at any time at 8:30 in the morning, we know how many students we have, and we know how many teachers we have. Mm-hmm. So by simple math, we have X amount of students by their income and salaries per student.
Exactly.
But it's so much different using DESE numbers, because they seem to be inflated quite a bit, and just for the benefit of something. So I'm not seeing a connection to reality with those numbers on the teacher's salary, but we can get into that at some other point.
What I think it is, like I said, it's normed for that individual metric. Mm-hmm. So I don't have the information other than from DESE to compare that to other district, so I have to use what DESE gives me. So whatever went into that 2,100 students, they use the same exact formula for Gil Montague. They use the same exact formula for Mohawk. So it becomes a normative comparison. And you're right. Is that different than when you show up on Thursday morning and count the number of kids in Four Corners School? Yeah. But in order to get that normative effect across districts, you have to use that same metric.
I understand. So, and my observation is that I can't depend a lot on these numbers. You'd come up with the class size out of the same metric and the number of teachers, which is inaccurate. So we have more than 156 teachers, but we use that as a number, and we have less than 2,140 students. So it just doesn't calculate.
No, but it's not inaccurate because comparing apples and apples across the different school districts.
Thank you. I just want to get through this. There was another, on the first page, a foundation enrollment of 1,830. So that's where we're also talking about money per student. Wow, we've got another number now for students. We got 1662, 2140, and 1830. But we know how many students we really have. So this is another metric massage to come up with an outcome percentage.
Well,
They all represent.
Okay, hold on. Superintendent, did you want to comment on it at all? Okay.
No,
I didn't ask a question, did I?
Yeah.
You seem
Can
a
I
little
answer it?
confused.
Okay, that foundation enrollment, again, it's a number used by DESE to calculate the net school spending or required spending for the district. That includes anyone that we send out of district, anyone who goes to Franklin County Tech, those types of things. So that is a DESE number. It is consistent across every single 258 school districts throughout the state, and the same formula is used for every single district across the state, and that's how they come up with their pure pupil average as well as their pure pupil cost that they put into the foundation budget in order to determine our net school spending as well as Chapter 70. Yeah.
So with that list you gave us, I think there were 19 or 20 districts, school districts. We paid more than 17 of those districts. So our net school spending is $3.8 million over the minimum, and 17 other districts are over the minimum, but less than $3.8 million. The only two districts that you gave us to review was Northampton and Amherst, and both of those were almost double and triple Greenfield.
I was just pointing out some of the highlights of that report because I wasn't going to go through all Franklin County districts. And what that, yes, you're right, absolutely, is $3.3 million above. However, as a percentage of the required budget, it's one of the lowest percentages. So you look at it as a proportion of what the total is. So if you're a millionaire, you can spend $1,000 on just flit it away. But if you make $15,000 a year, $1,000 is big money. So as that proportionate.
Right, and so I think that's my point, and thank you for making it for me. The idea is that we are as we so often are told, impoverished, rural, and basically needing everything that the state and the federal government can give us. And yet we are $3.8 million over the net school spending formula. So we go over and above and have been, as the superintendent mentioned earlier, Chapter 70 used to be $20,000 for an increase, or $67,000, and we constantly provide anywhere from $600,000 to $900,000 every year for the school budget. So because this language is out there and it's part of a presentation, I wanted to offer the perception from someone else looking at it, which is that we are doing very well and exemplary as far as providing funds for education. The increase in students, so it was, at last year's budget session, it was discussed commonly that there would be 100 new students, we had to fund for it. So the superintendent spoke this evening and said that there were 103 new students that came in. I don't know if we restricted any because of our choice vote in May on the number of seats available, but I know we've encouraged choice in. So at our report 2 weeks ago at the budget meeting from Lisa McGinnis, the registrar of admissions, she noted also that there was, I don't remember the number, but it was over 100. But there were a number of withdrawals or transfers, so that the net increase was 56. So it really doesn't matter who's in the seat. If there's 100 new students in 100 new seats, that's definitely an expense. But if it's less than that, then it's less of an expense. So I want to consider how we look at the increase in students, what it might cost. 56 would fit into, I don't know, 56 classrooms we have.
So just to clarify, the 103 choice-in students is, so this year there are 103 students choicing into Greenfield. So that would include, for example, last year, if a student had choiced into kindergarten last year and was in first grade, this year there are 103 students. Whereas the year before that, I think I said there were 90, right? So I think, right, every year we offer a certain amount of seats, and yes, it's capped by the committee, but it's not 100 students new per year coming in. Right. It's on a smaller order, because we're looking only at, if we have one available seat in a classroom, et cetera.
Thank you. You had also the number on the, can't find it handy now, there's so many papers. You had choice in, I think the superintendent was discussing that. The choice in, was that in her presentation or in Steve's?
I think
the
both,
choice
yeah.
in amounts and the choice out amounts.
Yep.
So choice in was, I think you had 559,000, and the choice out was 2.8 million.
Yep,
So I wanted to explain to all those who are in the audience and all those that are watching on the GCTV, is that the 559,000 is a direct revenue spout and pathway to the school department. Mm-hmm. And the $2.8 million is a revenue bill that an annual bill that the city has to pay the state. So that's a $2.3 million differential. I know you know that.
It's a cost.
But this is where it's relevant to the conversation, that there is no cap on students going out. So there's no restriction, whereas there is a cap on students coming in. So you might have just as many students that want to come into Greenfield, but you would have to make available seats for them. Or you might have to have more room for the elementary schools. So maybe if Green River were an elementary school and we had more space, if we were looking at on a different order of things and planning for long-term expansion in Greenfield, maybe we'd be getting a lot more students coming in. But the choice in is very regulated, and choice out, of course, isn't. And when students choice out, which they may have done this year or they may have done 8 years ago, they tend to stay in the placement because they've made friends, they've joined a sports team and so forth. So we talked to these folks, and I had a conversation again with Lisa McGinnis, our registrar, about continuing to see if there's some change or anything that can bring students back to Greenfield. But the reality, and what we hear from parents time and time again, is once they've made that decision, they're unlikely to reverse it unless something changes. And right now is one of those times, because of what's happening in neighboring districts. I think we have an opportunity for folks to sort of rediscover Greenfield, and that's important. There's a reason for them. And when we talk about what we offer in the schools, I think people are sometimes surprised, and they may not know the strength of our elementary program, the strength of our athletics program, the strength of our music, the fact that we have a full-time theater teacher in the middle school. These are reasons that folks want to be here. The fact that we teach students how to swim, that we have a partnership with the Y. These are tremendous, and equestrian program, things that people don't have elsewhere and want to come here for. But again, we can only allow in so many people as we have available seats.
So to address what seats do we have available, the high school has been designed for 585 students, and we have less than 500 there. I think it's 487 maybe. So we have a lot of seats available in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. What we've noticed when studying the enrollment through the classes, the class elementary to middle school and the high school, is that they drop off precipitously. So we may have 121 in AEL and may have 140 in first grade, but at the 7th grade, we have 100 in the high school. In this junior year, we have 95. We graduate 80. So there's something going on at that break, And it's been like that for 8 or 10 years, at least. And so I think that's worth studying, but we still have those empty seats in the high school. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we were down to 2.3 million 3 years ago. It seems like people don't want to listen to what we already know. So we were down to 2.3 million. Now we're up to 2.8, maybe a little bit less, because I think it's turned last year or this year. It's still an increase after we've already been to 2.9 before, and so it's been a struggle, and it's been over a period of half a generation. So it's, as the superintendent mentions, you don't really have an opportunity to change, because once the child and parents get acclimated to another school district, they want to stay there unless a situation like Pioneer happens where they now want to leave. So, and I know you're familiar with a couple of different school districts where there was a huge turnaround. So I would ask the chair, do you want to encourage further discussion on this, or do you want to go into numbers, or what do you, I'd like to share the conversation. People would like to speak to it.
I don't want to put the high school principal on the spot, but I actually am unclear on where the available space that you're referring to is. Our projection for next year is 523 students at Greenfield High School. We have large incoming 8th grade classes. We're looking at sections that are sort of bursting at the seams. We have a lot of interest in the high school. We have a beautiful building. We have a strong academic program. We have AP offering. Folks are at the high school. They're running out of space at the high school. I don't know where actually we're referring to, so I just would like to be specific if there's a place that there are empty seats so we can.
So I suggest that we actually pick up this conversation at the time that we're making decisions about school choice, and that is actually just around the corner. So we've heard a lot from you related to that. Do you have, sure?
I think a more general question that'll help us get to numbers. The beginning balances for FY19 for a number of accounts, I think, are a bit off.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, let's start with circuit breaker.
Okay.
I've got another sheet here that I had columns with. I'm going to find in a moment. The circuit breaker account, you've got listed, you've got your sheet, as $960,000.
That's estimated revenue, 960.
For
FY19.
Okay, so the 960, 233, is it?
960, 683.
683. So that is the exact amount that we received.
We don't know. That's an estimate. We don't know what we'll receive in FY19 yet.
Well, DESE has verified that number.
No, they have not.
17.
No, that's 19. We don't know. We won't know what the exact number is until May or June, when DESE does the final count of all the kids to make sure that someone didn't leave, things like that. So they're very exact with that.
So we have to spend all of that we can't roll it over another year. It can only be rolled over 1 year.
Well, it's a revolving account. It automatically rolls from year to year.
But we have to spend the 960.
No, it can roll. That's how the beginning balance got that high, because the money was not expended in that current year, so it accumulated some over the course of many years.
Okay, so we'll have to find another source that will explain that 960 does not have to be spent. So you're saying it doesn't have to be spent in the FY20 budget?
No, but my point earlier was that of that 960, we are scheduled to spend $903,000 for FY19, this current fiscal year.
Right, you didn't withdraw that?
No, that has not been withdrawn.
Okay, so we're in for that 903. Is that in addition to the 18,575,000 that we have now?
That is an offset to that number, yes.
To that number?
Yes.
And you're going to continue that offset in the future?
That offset has been there from the past and into the future, yes.
Do you list the circuit breaker at 739,909?
That would be the beginning balance for circuit breaker.
For what year?
For FY19.
So it wouldn't have been 960. That's where we have to...
That would have been the revenue. That would have been the estimated revenue for this year.
Okay. So maybe we can get together on that. So
Yeah, I'd be happy to, yeah.
The school lunch, we've got that listed as $159,793.
That would be the beginning balance, yes.
I've got $413,802.
For a beginning balance for school lunch?
School lunch.
I'm not sure if that takes into account some of the summer programs that they're running.
So we'll try to get that cleared up.
Yeah.
Preschool, we got it listed at 337.32, and I've got 399.382.
Oh, I see what's going on. When I took these balances...
These are from Munis.
These are from Munis. Since then, because everything was closed out so late in the year, it does need to be updated. I do need to get together with Liz to make sure that she's charged all the things appropriately to those beginning balances going forward.
Right.
I have yet to sit down with her to reconcile.
So that's including the revenues
closing,
also.
yes. All right, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So we have a number of different beginning balances, which will, the difference in the beginning balance, if you moved it all the way to the ending balance, you would then have a plus.
Hopefully a plus, yes.
A plus. And
Yes.
if you
Yeah, I would rather be
Yeah,
on the low
19
side than
million-
the negative side, yes.
If you had a $19,990,000 budget, then you would deduct that plus from the 19,990.
Yes. Yeah, and essentially, Liz and I, because Liz being so new, we have to go ahead and reconcile those two,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. I want to just address the Chapter 70 money, and who knows why we got an extra $1.1 million, but it's certainly a lot different than what we've had historically, as the superintendent notes. But as you also note, it's to be used to offset city-side costs associated with educational operations. Our increases as a community city has increased quite a bit because of retirement, Medicare, health insurance, and it's impacted by school department hires. So when you list a hire, whatever it might be, what position, and if it's $65,000, well, it's not really 65.
No, plus benefits, yeah.
Plus all the benefits. So that might add another 40 to 60%, depending on the type of hire. So that we have to consider that because it's a real expense. So I guess I'm just kind of paving the way for future discussions on looking at the budget and why the city will be sharing part of that $1.1 million. Thank you. Are you?
Thank you, Mayor. Member Karen or Member Alexander, do you have any questions or comments? Yes, Member Alexander.
I guess this one will be more towards the superintendent, my concern. Every year, administrators ask for certain positions to be filled because we have students to teach. And this year, again, we're only filling a handful of positions, but I guess furthermore, the last statement on the page 7 of the budget manager's report says 4 more IA positions were cut. And I guess my curiosity is, how many IAs are we short in the district, and where are we hurting the most? Where do we need them at? Like elementary, middle, and I guess that's what I want to know.
Yes.
That's straightforward.
But there was a That was a question I asked the business manager at a subcommittee meeting, and you told me that those 4 positions were vacant. So there is no person working in either of those 4 positions.
That is
They were funded and not hired.
They're current vacant positions right now, and that is the best way to capture 100% of the cost. Whether or not those are going to be the actual positions that get eliminated, it depends on how things get shuffled around.
Okay.
Superintendent.
So I just want to clarify vacant positions. If we're saying vacant positions, we need to step back for a second. We're recommending an elimination or a reduction here because it's the best way and because we have collective bargaining agreements that tell us how we are going to go about reductions in force. And the first way that you look for savings is through vacant positions. This position could have been vacant for a year or it could have been vacant for a day. So this could have been somebody that moved to another state on Friday, and today we're saying the position is vacant. It does not mean that the position is not needed. It doesn't mean, this could be, for example, a vacant position with some child's one-on-one aid, and that position is vacant because the person got sick and stopped working to take care of an elderly parent. The position's vacant. Does that mean we're going to have to fill that position? Yes. Yes, we still have to fill that position, but we've made a cut there, and then we'll reassign somebody based on the priority. It means that we are cutting 4 positions that this year were budgeted because we thought they were critical. Last year, we reduced, I think, 6 IAs. The year before that, we reduced, I think, 5 IAs. Because there's turnover in this unit, which is making basically minimum wage, we're able to find vacancies, but it doesn't mean that the positions themselves are not needed. It just means that on a day that the position is vacant, we can say, today that position is vacant, and it saves the district some money.
Member Alexander? You're finished, okay. Member Huron, did you have any questions or comments?
I guess it's really just a comment or maybe a charge to us to think about things outside the box. One of the things we hear about every time, I mean, I say every time, this is my second time sitting at this budget table, is how do we get more kids to choice in and how do we get kids to stop choicing out? And then we talk about cutting services left and right. And I don't really understand how we can make those 2 things meet by cutting budgets and not understanding why we cut a large part of our budget last year of tune of $825,000. And the school had to scramble to make up half of that. And now we're looking at a funding cliff because of it, and then wondering why people choose to leave. That's why. Because people don't understand that just because we aren't spending the money doesn't mean we don't have amazing teachers with amazing services and amazing AP classes and electives and equestrian and swimming. We have all of this, but our public image isn't doing that when we say, we can cut the budget on the schools, they don't need that money. But we do. We need every dollar, and we need twice as many as we have.
Thank you, Member Karen. Killing it. So I have a couple of questions and comments. Did you have a response specific to, okay. First, are there any costs to modify the facility at the Green River School that we are not talking about in order to start up the Great Schools program? The building itself.
Alan Schmidt is here, but I believe at this point in time, we have made the necessary moves and or have plans for all necessary moves to open with that program in mind, because that follows the vote of the committee. If we were going to make a different kind of programmatic change, then we might need to make some future modifications. But at this point, that has been our plan, and we've planned for it.
Okay, so there aren't any kind of unspoken costs related to modifying the facility at this point, moving forward.
He wants to.
Alan, yes, welcome.
Join us.
Welcome to the hot seat. Keep it short.
They are ADA compliant. They have new windows, new doors. The flooring is now asbestos-free. We should be ready to go.
One
It's just
specific-
a matter of probably about 4 or 5 weeks to clean up the hallways, and we should be good to go.
One specific question that came up recently at the council meeting was the height of the toilets. Is that something that still needs to be addressed?
No, we already took care of making them ADA compliant for high schoolers.
Okay. Okay.
So we kept the bulk of them the same fixtures, but we are ADA compliant to handle a handful of high schoolers.
And then related to, it's my understanding that there's still no heat in that building.
Correct.
For good reason. If we're not planning to open it until the next year, that would make sense. Is that another cost that we need to take into consideration, or is that something that we factored in?
The energy department is handling that on the city side.
Okay.
And when they're done, hopefully early in the summer, it'll give me time to get the school clean and ready to open up for whatever you want to do with it.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mayor Martin.
Yes, I can offer some information. We had some money to work on Green River a couple years ago. We went through the process with the request for proposals, working in with a couple of vendors, and then Alan requested to do some asbestos removal. We acquiesced to his request and ended up spending more money than we had, able to take care of the heating system, and so now it's asbestos free, but it doesn't have any heat. So we'll be going to the council in the next couple of weeks. We've been working with vendors for 3 months, trying to get the cost down to the wallet we had, and that didn't work. So we're going to do another RFP and request $170,000 from the town councils to be able to finish the heating system at Green River. So yeah, it takes time. I don't think it's going to be done by early summer. You'll be lucky to have it by August. But that is the goal.
Well,
so work closely with Capital and Energy. And if you can maintain contact with her, that would be very helpful.
I did.
Good.
Yeah, we've been emailing back and forth. That's why I asked if we could have that done by the end of June, so that this way we'd have time to get the place ship-shape.
Thank you.
We're on that email.
Thank you both. I have a couple other questions. Do you have something related to facilities? Okay. No. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions related to facilities for Alan? Okay. Thank you very much, Alan. I guess this is somewhat related to our facilities, but it also is somewhat in Carol Collins' department. With our energy savings initiatives, et cetera. It's my understanding, and from the reports that we've received, that we have reduced our energy consumption, and that essentially ends up meeting a savings to the city. So this is something that came up in some budget conversations related to additional expenses related to facilities like utilities and other costs that are not necessarily incorporated into the school committee budget. Just to begin with, I actually think that this practice needs to end pretty soon, because it's really difficult for us to fully understand what those costs are. It's difficult to be transparent with the community about those costs. I also am interested in seeing what those figures may be and if there are actual increases, because from what we receive reports on, we actually are seeing decreases in energy use, and my understanding is decreases in actual cost to the city. I'm excited about that. I'm very glad to be, involved with moving Greenfield into a green direction, which, of course, we all know we are a green city. So that's something I'm interested in hearing more about. And related to additional figures that are real costs, as the mayor noted, to the city, I would really like to see some figures as to what the estimates are for actual costs related to school employee insurance increases and any other costs related to our employees specifically. Again, this is something that is generally handled by the city, and we don't necessarily see those figures. We can look again on some Department of Revenue reports that are just outdated. So I actually moved to request that Town Hall, in coordination with our department, our business department, provide us with some estimates for increases to these estimated increases to insurance expenses and any other relevant expenses that the city may be paying for that we do not have clear numbers on. So I'm looking at specifically the increases from this year to next year.
Yeah, second.
Or decrease, sure. Second by member Karen. Is there any discussion on that? Yes, Mayor Martin.
Yes, I think the business manager could get a copy from the finance director of the report we file annually for the city's contribution to education. That includes Medicare, health insurance, retirement pension, and various other, including utilities, central maintenance, DPW, and anything else that might be added to that. So it's totally transparent and has to be filed with Department of Revenue.
And related to estimated expenses and insurance costs, is my understanding that the HR department at Town Hall has an understanding of any percentage increases for next year. In theory, we should have that information too, and we can have some kind of rough estimate for next year. Is that correct?
For health insurance?
Yes.
I don't know who has that. I haven't agreed to anything. So we don't have a negotiated health insurance increase. Last year we had a 9.5, and final negotiations ended up at 0. So the rumor now is 5, maybe 3.5. So it just hasn't got to the point where we're sitting down discussing a final increase in health insurance, which right now the average is around 6.5.
And do you have an idea when that occurs?
We have to have it done by, I think, the end of May.
And this is something that we negotiate annually?
It's something the mayor negotiates with the insurance company.
Annually?
Annually.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So there's a motion on the table. Yes, Superintendent.
I just wanted to say the mayor's correct that there is an end-of-year report, and we do, in fact, receive that information annually. It would be very helpful for our purposes if that could also include the specific employees, the specific benefits, if there's anything that we could be doing to contribute to savings, if the energy consumption is particularly high in any building, if we could receive a more itemized breakdown of the indirect costs that the city pays, which contribute to our net school spending. And if the Budget and Finance Subcommittee could look at that, because they are significant costs and because they are part of our total education spending that counts towards education requirements here in Greenfield, it'd be very useful to have a robust conversation about how we could contribute to savings there and what those particular lines are, not just the aggregate.
Yeah.
Mayor.
Yes, and I think that's a good idea, to try to detail as much as possible. Of course, this has been ongoing for several decades on this type of report to DOR, and certainly before I got here. But the trend that I've noticed is that it's the total cost is somewhere, since I've been mayor in the past 10 years, has gone from 29 million to 33 million, and maybe a little higher, but the percentage has gone from 62 to 67% of the entire city budget. So that's the type of a chunk of unsustainable progress that we've got to look at, everyone who's putting budgets together, to see how long we can sustain that growth.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Any other comments? Everyone understands what we're voting on? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay. Susan, what is your vote? Are you with us? Member Hollins?
Susan.
She can vote. Yeah.
She's not there.
Is she not there?
I'm sorry. I said I would abstain. I momentarily had to phone on mute.
Okay, that was an abstention?
Are you abstaining or are you voting?
Yes, I said I would abstain.
Okay.
Okay, Member Hobbs abstains. technically, when any member is actually participating remotely, we are to have a roll call vote. So let's go through that motion, if you don't mind. Secretary, if you could just call the roll and have us vote again.
Mayor Martin.
Yes.
Member Alexander.
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Karen.
Yes.
Chairwoman Nunes.
Yes.
Myself is also a yes, and Susan?
I'll abstain.
Thank you. So motion carries. So we'll look forward to that information. Okay, so I just have some kind of general comments related to the substitutes. First of all, I do wholeheartedly support some increase to that line. When I think about substituting in the schools and I do a comparison in terms of wages, I do think that it's working against us. I do support the work that we've done in the past to raise the substitute pay. I think we need to raise it even further. It's my understanding that we are essentially competing for a very small pool of individuals that are participating as substitutes in this region. And we are hearing loud and clear from essentially all of our staff that this is one of the major problems that we need to find a solution to. So I am very willing to add to this line and to increase our substitute rate. I have an additional question related to the before school care. I'm still just a little bit confused related to how it works. I don't have kids in the system, so if somebody wants to drop off their child, say, at Newton School a little bit early, as of right now, is that not accessible? Or I guess I just need a little more specific information about pardon, I think I said after school, but I meant before school. Can somebody walk me through it? Just break it down really basic. Oh, Mel. I appreciate you, Mel.
And called up from the bench.
At Newton School,
Thank you.
Sure. Is this on? Yeah. At Newton School, the past practice has been at 7:30 we open our doors. We pay a bunch of instructional assistants to cover the time between 7:30 and 7:50. Teachers are not contractually on duty until 7:50.
Okay.
So you're paying instructional assistants every single day to monitor that. We also, our buses, many of them only get there maybe at 7:45 or 7:50. So it's a convenience parents, I think, are used to for dropping off early. It's something to look at. You know, we know that a lot of children go to the Y before school because they even have an earlier program and a bus stops at the Y. So there are other early bird programs in our town. It's just, again, I think I want to say on behalf of all the principals who are here, we're always looking at the fact that we're short-staffed.
Yes.
We're always stealing from one thing to do another one.
Yes.
And why I'm here, one of my biggest concerns that's not in this budget and doesn't look like it has any funds behind it is technology. I'm very proud of the fact that we have robotics in our schools. I'm very proud that we're always looking at STEM and the fact that there's not any money in there for computer programs that my teachers use every day, or hardware is a big problem.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So is it a requirement for families to kind of pre-register for the early morning drop-off? Just kind of anybody can show up at 7:30? Okay. Thank you very much. That is really helpful.
It's different at the other.
Oh, yes, actually, if it's different at the other schools.
Four Corners and Federal Street are actually the same schedule. So what we consider before school care is from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. It's a half an hour. We have drop off. We consider normal school drop off between 8 and 8:30. School doesn't start until 8:30. So IAs are providing that coverage between 8 and 8:30. But we do have to have additional staff come in for before school from 7:30 to 8 to essentially watch the kids. So there are some, and they're at the doors at 8 o'clock or 7:30. They're being dropped and left at the doors at 7:30. So it is, I would say, on a given day, I may have in that half hour 50 to 60 students, give or take, in that half an hour time.
At your school alone?
At my school alone, yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty in demand, and it's not every day consistent families, their schedules are all different. Some of them are consistent that they're there 7:30, others, it's flexible. And then there's no after school that's run by the Greenfield Grass program. There is an after school, but it's not run by the Greenfield Public Schools. And then I know that just being at AEL previously, I know I can speak to that, is that they're the same. They also have a 7:30 to 8:30. Basically, school doesn't start till 8:30, so they have to have IAs cover it from 7:30 to 8:30. I think it's a little bit different there because they're considering that whole hour before school. So it's a little bit different makeup there because they're not going out to recess at that time and whatnot. And then they're the only school that's doing an after-school program staffed by Greenfield Public School employees.
So if we were to make this cut at your two buildings, would you still open the doors at 8?
8.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is this also happening at the middle school or? Okay.
Typically, our doors open at 7:15 in the morning.
Okay.
So we have IAs who cover pickups for students who have services at 7:15. So IAs are still paid at the early time to come in and provide that coverage. But we're talking our school day, they're released and sent off to classes starting at 7:30 a.m.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for all of that information. Did you have an additional comment?
I really want to say that I think that what the committee decides to do with this is obviously up for discussion. The reason we've proposed this is because we are looking to identify every dollar that can be spent in the classroom. We have at the middle school a school where we're in the turnaround process. We are a district that has been designated, and there is intensive work going on to ensure that every student is achieving at very high levels, and we're really focused on this student performance. And so in that factor, we're trying to look at trade-offs and say, where can we use these dollars and maximize them? But having said that, the reason that we have not made this recommendation sooner is because there really is a safety factor here and there is a supervision factor. And for a number of these students, this is absolutely the safest place for them to be in the morning. And the alternative is not, a parent drops them off at school later. The alternative for many of these students is that they are home unattended during that period of time, or they're walking to school, or they're with a child or a neighbor or a friend or somebody who is not necessarily an ideal situation. So I just want to remind folks that for some people this is a convenience, and for other it has been a necessity, and that's why this recommendation has not come sooner.
Thank you, Superintendent. I just have a couple more comments. I don't think I stated it very clearly earlier, but I do not support cutting the bus routes. I just want to be very clear with the community where I stand with that. I do not support that. I do, however, support any kind of efforts that are being made to modify our special education transportation to be able to take that on within our district. I 100% support that, and I am looking forward to more conversation related to it. I want us all to be really, really clear about some numbers, and I have some concern about everyone's understanding of what a level service budget actually is for next year. So if the superintendent, if you could please comment on the actual number for what it would mean for us not to add on anything, just to keep everything the same for next year. What actually is that number that we're talking about?
I think a figure of $19,161,000 has been what we're describing as a level service budget. So just doing what we did this year for $18,575,000 will cost us about over $600,000 more next year. So 19,161 is the number. I think that most closely reflects that.
So are you including the additional offsets that we utilized, including the pothole funding and the choice funding, et cetera, that was utilized to kind of essentially supplement the council's budget this year? Did you?
Basically, some of the pothole funding, for example, that'll be zeroed out for this year.
Right.
But it is a reliance on choice charter and any type of other funding that we have in there.
So the 19.161 that was just quoted, that would include balancing the offsets that we utilized this year, as well as essentially our contractual obligations moving forward to keep us staffed the same way.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think it's really important for us to keep this figure in mind. I still feel a little confused about that figure and its accuracy. I'm staring at a number right now that's actually higher than that. And according to my kind of general calculations, I actually think it is higher than that.
I just want to clarify. So I think one of the things that's confusing is we have a local fund. We're talking about money coming from the state. We have general funds that are local, but we're talking about all these other funds. And what's missing is the all funds, what does it cost to actually educate a child in Greenfield, regardless of where it's coming from? If you have a joint checking account and someone contributes this much and someone else contributes that much, but you end up spending, X number of dollars, in the end, it doesn't really matter where it's coming from. Your total dollar value is the same. And I really think that maybe in our next budget conversation, maybe we can put together, Steve and I have been working a lot to how to explain this in a very straightforward way. And I think we can get you just a handful of slides even. Steve has put together a number of things that would have been available tonight, but perhaps not 48 hours in advance, so we decided not to share them with the committee this evening.
I think that information is going to be crucial in this conversation, not only with our own committee, but also moving forward, in the mayor's calculations and moving on to the council. So I would support really a kind of side-by-side comparison between what is projected for next year and what we've actually done for this year. And in the end, we do end up voting an all-funds budget with a specific understanding of what we're asking for in terms of a local contribution. In addition to this, I think it's going to be really helpful to have an understanding of what it would actually cost our taxpayers. This is another piece of information that tends to be missing from the conversation. I know it was certainly missing last year. How much does it cost if we increase the school budget by $400,000? How much would it cost by $800,000, et cetera? So I guess at this time, without getting too specific, I am moving that at the March 7th meeting, if not sooner, we have a side-by-side comparison of overview of the all funds budget for this year, as well as what is being drafted for next year, including an estimate as to what increases would occur to local taxpayers to fund next year's budget. Is there a second? Second by Member Ekstrom. Okay, any conversation on that? Mayor Martin.
Would you explain what you just said?
Yes, absolutely. So essentially, I think that things get a little confused. And last year, what ended up happening was we had, the council budget was 18,575. And then we supplemented even further from various accounts. And this is what you are frequently referring to, is what are we spending out of circuit breaker? What are we spending out of these other accounts? So what I'm looking for is an overview of this year, just a basic chart, basic graph, really, not a graph, but just, a side-by-side comparison of the local contribution, the Chapter 70 funding, the, what we're spending out of revolving accounts. I think we can break it down into kind of the bigger accounts. Maybe just a line that's an other line that kind of captures some of the smaller contributions to our budget, and then look at that side by side. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, you're looking for something that will encapsulate an all funds budget, compare it from 19 to 20, and then have an estimate on different scenarios or cost impacts and what's the impacts to the average local taxpayer.
Yes, and part of the reason why I'm interested in the impact to the local taxpayer is because, for example, the Chapter 70 funding, if that were to go straight into our classrooms, it may not have an impact on our local taxpayers. I understand that there are other costs that the city is taking over, but I think it's really important to be really clear about what it is that we're putting forward, and to just have this information when we move on into the next phases of the conversation.
Okay.
Yes, Mayor Martin.
Yeah, I think Steve started this. You did the working with the F19 beginning balance, ending balance, FY20 beginning balance, FY20 ending balance. What additional information are you looking at from Steve?
So I have the charts that you have in front of you. They seem to be confusing to you at times. I think that what I'm looking for is a simplification of this and putting it all together to calculate our bottom line total, so that we all can just see it really simply in one little simple side-by-side comparison.
So we're using hypotheticals to predict the budget next year? Is that what you're doing, 2021?
What?
No hypothetical.
Just
plan. Take this last year's plan, lay it out simply. Take this plan, lay it out simply. Put them side by side, compare them. We're working on it.
year to year?
Yeah.
Yes.
19 to 20? Yeah.
Exactly. Simple.
You've already done
I think this is the first time they've seen any type of numbers, yeah.
Whatever he's
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So that's...
You're right, it's probably all budget committee.
We do actually have those, but
Well, no, that thing he's got is better. Some weird thing.
okay, so we're all clear? Yes, Member Ekstrom? I'm good.
She's got stuff.
Oh, you have stuff. Great. There's a motion on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, can we have a roll call?
Mayor Martin.
Yes.
Member Alexander.
Yeah.
Member Karen. Yes. Member Nunes.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Member Hollins.
Oh my God.
Member Hollins.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. That concludes my commentary at this time. Member Ekstrom, take it away.
I will be short but sweet. As I look through the budget, I don't see anything related to computers and Chromebooks that we need to improve upon. Last report that we saw, I believe, was in excess of 300,000. That's not in here. We had a request for a fourth grade teacher, and we just said no. Those two things alone indicate to me that we are not providing the best education that we can to our students. Eliminating those particularly those two bus routes where we have students that are struggling to get to school as it is, and knowing that route, I mean, I'm by no means am I a helicopter mom, but I wouldn't want my kid walking that route to school. I think that by ignoring these things, we're doing a disservice to the students in the school district, and I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves. I mean, we're
we're not this naive of a group. And so to see these things not included, including an HR person, which I really wanted to see in the last budget, the superintendent is overextended with the responsibilities of the superintendent job to begin with. Human resources is a whole different ball of wax to be overwhelmed with. And ignoring these things doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it go away. They still exist, and we can't ignore them. As far as I'm concerned, this budget actually should be larger so that it could include all those things. And guess what? This is the cost of providing an education in Greenfield. Can't really negotiate the cost of what a student's education costs. Their lack of computers and appropriate software, not enough teachers. I think we're naive to not have those things in here. And I wish the budget actually were larger, because those things need to be included. I'm done.
Thank you, Member Ekstrom. Member Hollins, do you have any comments or questions?
Well, it's a little hard. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
It's a little hard not knowing if you can hear me clearly.
We can hear you.
But I do think the budget subcommittee was planning at its next meeting to go through the budget and clarify areas where there was more money needed and areas where there might be efficiencies. I personally don't support anything that would eliminating anything that would encourage more parents to leave the district. And I think we need to look carefully at transportation. And I hope we keep looking at where we can find efficiencies, if they exist, that will not erode the program. And I think having some service for parents right before school is really important. And because I'm remote, I'll leave it at that.
Yes, Superintendent.
I just want to address this point that we're constantly asked to find efficiencies. We're constantly asked to develop innovative programs, and we're constantly asked to make attractive programs so families choice in, but we're constantly asked to reduce the budget so that once they get here, we sort of trim it back. And I just want to say that there are no other ways to cut without affecting students. Everything we do affects students, but we have done as much as we can to cut our instructional programs. We're cutting instructional aides. We're trying to leave one teacher in every classroom. That seems like a bare minimum. But we are now looking at buses, because what else are we going to cut? And then folks say, well, you can't cut that, but find other efficiencies. I mean, at a certain point, people are going to get pink slips, and we have to recognize that if you want to cut further, it's got to come from somewhere. And to date, there hasn't been a bottom line from a subcommittee, and there hasn't been a clear consensus. So we're putting forward our best effort at both finding efficiencies and preserving the quality of education in Greenfield. And I just want to express that there's not a lot left and not many ways left to do that.
Thank you, Superintendent. Okay. Yes, Mayor Martin.
No, I'm reminded of a number of meetings I go to, and all with municipal employees, and we sit down and talk about the initiatives or projects or how to spend the money in the budget. And I'm fond of saying, because it's so true, I'm the only one sitting there that represents the taxpayer. So whenever you sit down with a group of municipal employees, there's really never, ever a representative from the taxpayer. We've seen it somewhat in town council meetings. Very rarely does it happen interior to the government of Greenfield. So I'm also concerned about the taxpayer and the amount of budget total of the school department is alarming. We have to look at this in reality. It cannot keep increasing each year to a pretty much stagnant cap. The city budget is the last 10 years has gone up about 1.1 million a year. That's been the average increase for the city budget for a decade. So any huge increase is going to upset the old apple cart. So my comments, I'd like to continue with the budget, and I don't want to spend all the time talking about these parts. Help me get through this. The FY19 budget has 390.89 FTEs. The FY20 budget is 403.94 FTEs. That's a difference of roughly 13 FTEs. But we're told that the increase is 5.5 new hires. So what's the difference between 13 and 5.5? So the budget for FY19 approved shows 390 full-time employees. The budget for FY20 proposed shows 403, but part of the proposed budget narrative only shows 5.5 people.
That was an additional 5.5 to the 304.
So it's really 13 plus 3? Or 13 plus 5.5?
5.5, yes.
So why wouldn't you say 18.5 over last year?
Because that budget is a base budget, and then these would be additions above that base.
All right, let's assume it's 18.
Okay.
If 18 people took health insurance, the town pays 80/20. So your cost of 18 in the school department seems like it's already absorbed 13 and it's only going to absorb a new 5.5. Then your cost, our city cost for just health insurance is 15,000 times 18.
Yes. There's no question.
So Mayor Martin, we've asked for this information to come to us, a projection of what those increased costs would be. And as you noted, we don't have that number exactly, but we can project.
Okay, also in the narrative, I'll go on. Thank you, Steve. Also in the narrative, there's 2% COLA, cost of living increase you mentioned earlier. How can we build into the budget 2% when we haven't negotiated a contract? We're building in the steps, but it says 2% COLA plus steps.
There's just steps in the budget. There's no 2% COLA. We had a placeholder for that increase that I talked about earlier of that, say, 10% from year to year. That has been taken out. The only thing left in there are for lane changes and contractual changes.
Okay. Thank you. That was in Part B. It also notes in here that $808,000 is going to be returned to revolving. It's not used in the FY20 budget. Did I read that correctly?
That is correct, and that's consistent with policy.
So the $808,000 remains in the revolving accounts?
There is a balance in the revolving accounts that you can choose to use. However, at the budget subcommittee meeting, you folks said you must conform to policy, and policy means that we can only use to the extent of next year's revenues. So everything was brought in line with next year's revenues. If you choose to use additional revolving account money, that's fine, and that will help balance the budget.
So we agreed, do we get together whenever you're available to verify those beginning balances?
Yeah, I took a look at that, and those beginning balances are as of January 31st, so there must have been some closing entries done since then.
So we can get new numbers and help with the budget before our March 7th vote.
Yes.
It's not anybody's fault, but we were awarded a $100,000 pothole award, I think 2013 or so. We have verified with the state. They said, geez, spend it tomorrow, please. And so can we move that forward? I think there are a couple options. If you check with the finance director.
Okay.
Because it's not in the FY19 budget. I mean, if we could, I think you can move it into special ed revolving.
Yeah, what we can do is just do a journal entry on that one.
Okay.
That would be the easiest.
And then there was an article in the paper, I don't know, do we fund AP courses? There was an article in the Globe about the AP courses, how they're doing so well in Massachusetts, and we weren't in the top 50. There were a couple local local county schools that were. I'm wondering, do we fund that anyway? I think we used to have we paid their application fee maybe? But it sounds like people aren't doing it anymore. Does anyone have an answer to that?
What are you asking? You're asking if students are taking the AP test?
Are the students taking the AP courses like they have been in the past? Right now, the recent scorecard for Massachusetts schools didn't have Greenfield in it in the top 50. And we used to do pretty well. Do we know?
I'm just still not clear on what the question is.
Yes, we have an AP program. We have a strong AP program. Yes, we fund our AP program. I'd have to verify if we also pay for students to take the AP exam. My memory of this is that we pay for students who are on free and reduced lunch. If they're going to take the AP exam, we have some way of helping them so that we are encouraging people to take the AP placement.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So the superintendent and Steve have offered to meet with members or talk with members if they have any specific questions, if they want to fully better understand the budget, et cetera. It also came up as a suggestion to potentially hold a special meeting, a special sort of budget retreat, I believe, this weekend. I'm not sure if there's interest in that. I'm not available this Saturday. I'll be at a wedding far away. However, if there is interest amongst committee members, is that something that you all would want to do this coming Saturday?
Unfortunately, I'm also unavailable this weekend.
Okay. I know, Mayor, you were talking about meeting with Steve privately to clarify some details.
I wouldn't say privately. I'd be meeting with the finance director and try to get to the current balances using Munis.
Sure.
But I'm not in favor of a budget retreat. I've been on a budget journey since November.
Okay.
In the subcommittee.
Okay, great.
Working with the superintendent and the business manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So then, with all that said, I would just encourage members to reach out to the superintendent and Steve with any additional questions. We will, of course, convene on March 7th for our budget vote. We will look forward to the information that we've requested. At this time, I do want to open the floor for any additional public comment on the hearing. On the FY20 budget. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? If you could state your name and address again for the record.
My name is Mary Traver, and I live on Homestead Avenue in Greenfield.
Thank you.
I'd just like to respond to the mayor's remark about the taxpayer representation, and as a homeowner and a taxpayer in Greenfield, I would be more than happy to see a reasonable increase in my taxes to fund the school budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members?
Hello again.
Hi.
Crystal Zimmer, 10.5 Stanley Street in Greenfield. First of all, I had a question as to whether or not, so I didn't feel like there was a lot of talk about the 1.1 million extra. That was like any specific talk about how that would be used. I understand that there's a lot more retirement and health insurance and all that kind of stuff on the city side. So I understand that it's going into the city kind of side of the education piece. My concern is that the city will say, oh, we have an extra 1.1 million, so we don't have to maybe put as much as we originally were going to into that side of the city budget. And so then that would be covered by that 1.1 million, because these increases that we're talking about are normal and they happen every year. So these are things that are always taken into consideration of the city side of the budget. So great, we have this 1.1 million, so we can just take some of this other, 1.1 million that we were going to put in the city side of the education budget and go throw it into a new library or a new fire station or somewhere else that doesn't actually go into our classrooms. So that is one of my concerns. And the other concern and the other thought is that if that were sort of the case, take some of that 1.1 million and go ahead and approve a budget that has a lot more increases in it using other money from that. I know how this works. I know how you can label one thing 1.1 million from the state and you can do 1.1 million from the taxpayers and how you can redirect some of that funding. So instead of redirecting it out of the classrooms, it needs to be redirected into the classrooms. The second thing that I wanted to say is that all of the cuts that I saw really impact the most needy of our students, the 2 routes, the 4 paraprofessionals, and how much of the substitute budget is going towards working with those filling in those paraprofessional things. And the teachers are totally stressed out that they can't get subs, but we have vacancies. And $15,000 for somebody to work full-time is nothing. We need to consider really increasing that. So that 1.1 million really needs to go into the classrooms. And and one tiny last thing is that we have, you said over the last 10 years, we've had a lot of increases in the school budget in every year and every year and every year. And Superintendent Harper was talking about how we get more and more students every single year. And the students that we're getting are ELL students, they are special ed students, they are students who are underprivileged, they are from Greenfield Gardens, they are from Oak Courts, they're from Leiden Woods. And these kids have nothing. Okay, so when you're complaining about how every 10 years, for over the 10 years we've had such an increase, well, yeah, we have, because we have a whole lot more kids, and these kids are busting at the seams, and these kids are underserved, I think, in our district. We're trying, the teachers are wonderful, but they are underserved. So I don't want to hear a little nitpicking, that's all.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on. We will close the public hearing. Do we need to vote for that? I don't think so. And we will move on to executive session. I do not believe we will come back for a public vote, or will we? Steve, do you anticipate that we will come back for a public vote after executive session?
Yes.
Okay.
On the transportation, yes.
Okay. So GCTV and anyone else left. We will possibly come back for a public vote. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion to enter into executive session for the purposes of number 3 and 10. That is 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares. This is in regards to Unit A. And 10, to discuss trade secrets or confidential, competitively sensitive, or other proprietary information.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. Seconded by Member Ekstrom, moved by Member Karen. Roll call, please.
Mayor Martin. Yes. Member Alexander.
Thank you.
Member Karen. Yes. Nunez.
Yes.
Member Ekstrom, yes. Member Hollis.
Yes.
Okay, we are now in executive session. Thank you, GCTV. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for waiting for us to return from executive session. It's great to see so many faces here for the closing of our meeting. We have one item to vote on. Ms. Farber, could you read the motion to us, please?
The motion is quite simple. To support the Kuzmiskis bid pending contract approval for a
5-year term.
Great. Can we have a motion to support the Kuzmeskis bid pending contract approval for a 5-year term?
So moved.
And a second by Mayor Martin. Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Susan? Great, just for formality, Bill, it's a yes?
Yep.
Yes.
Katie? I'm a yes. And Member Hollins is a yes. All right, I move to adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Me too.
Yep.
Yes.
Aye.
All of our productions at GCTV are sponsored in part by Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. Greenfield Community College, providing access and excellence in higher education in the Pioneer Valley. Visit them at gcc.mass.edu. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com. Call them at 772-0838 and check them out on Facebook. Real Cleaning Services, cleaning Hampshire and Franklin County since 1972. We don't cut corners, we clean them. Check them out online at realclean.com. Call them at 413-422-1143. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. The Solar Store of Greenfield, replacing fossil fuels and nuclear power one home at a time. Visit them at 23 Fisk Ave. Call them at 413-772-3122 or visit them online at solarstoreofgreenfield.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all of GCTV's productions.